Hello guys, today my group will be discussing the cons against forced redistribution of wealth. In my group, we will have Toby Williams, Daniela Garcia, Marissa Butler, Christiane Johnson, Aiden Sardinas, Karina Cardenas, Kaylin Benton, and myself. Forced redistribution of wealth is forcing the middle and upper class to give money to the poor. Today my group will be advocating against the rich to give money to the poor. Welfare is the financial support the government gives people who aren't able to provide for themselves. The money is funded by the taxpayers that are taking out of hard workers' income. People that apply for the support decide not to make so good life choices, such as falling into addiction. People who are often on welfare believe that others shouldn't have to work. This leads them to believe if the money is given to them steadily without them having to work, why bother even being a productive member of society? The government official offices reports say that an estimated 10.6% of the welfare payments are fraudulent. That is a total of $77.8 billion of taxpayers' money.
I'm going to talk about the ethics surrounding the forced redistribution of wealth. To start, making the rich give their money to the poor would be immoral and an unjust law. In Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail, he states that an unjust law is one that is, quote, out of harmony with the moral law, also known as God's law. He also says one has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. The forced redistribution of wealth would be out of tune with moral law in every way. This happening would essentially be glorified theft. Stealing is not and has never been tolerated. Why should it be tolerated now? MLK also states, an unjust law is a code that a numerical or power majority group compels a minority group to obey but does not make binding on itself. This lines up perfectly because the majority of people are not rich and would be placing an obligation on the few while being unwilling to abide by the same rules. Lastly, the forced redistribution of wealth would be immoral because it would open the door to other greater injustices. In his letter, MLK also states, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. It would be immoral to promote and facilitate injustices. If we were to let this happen, there's no telling what other great injustices people will make legal and acceptable.
The way an economical system works is you have your producers and consumers. If we force the rich to give to the poor, these two will become unbalanced in numbers. What we mean by this is once the consumers gain more money and spend that money, producers will then want to raise prices. But once consumers cannot afford the higher prices, producers will no longer make profit from them. This could lead to another stock market crash. When a stock market crashes, trillions of dollars are lost from businesses all over the country. This leads investors to forcefully go out of businesses, and sooner or later, people will have a very limited number of places to buy necessities from. With all these businesses shutting down, we would go into panic searching for resources. Worst case scenario would be that we go into a second Great Depression and poverty rates skyrocket.
When the poor are just given money, they won't have any work ethic to get the money for themselves.
If a person has everything handed to them, it is natural for them to not want to work hard to achieve anything for themselves. If they get rewarded for doing nothing beneficial and achieving nothing, then they are going to continue to be non-beneficial in life. This leads to absolute laziness and no self-motivation whatsoever. This causes lack of responsibility and self-reliance. The poor develop a disrespect for others when they do not have to do anything for themselves. This destroys the creative process when nobody has to find new ways to do things. This creates no room for economic growth. People are used to getting rewarded for the things they do. If there is no rewarded outcome, most will stop. People who work hard and spend years of studying to get where they are should not be forced to give someone who has not worked for what they have. It is unfair and will eventually result in a societal and economical collapse.
The wealthy have the power to act without the constraint of necessity or fate. They have the ability to act at their own discretion. The rich have the free will over who they want to give their money to. Free will to donate money may be denied by the higher class. Free will is voluntary behavior that should be chosen by the wealthy in order to give to the poor. The wealthy have freedom over their own actions and their moral responsibility. The higher class are responsible for the things they have done. To fail some act that would be morally responsible is up to them entirely. It is up to them whether they want to give their money to the poor or keep it. The power of acting or of not acting according to determination of will, that is, if we choose to move, we may. Free will does not mean one will, but many wills conflict in one man. Freedom cannot be conceived simply. Flannery O'Connor.
With more money comes more power, and the ones with the most money have used that power to reinforce structures and create policies that neglect the poor and protect the rich. Though this might sound unjust at first, there are good reasons why poverty must exist on an international and local level. Take the story of our country, for instance. For many years, European countries maintained a great amount of wealth and used that wealth to obtain great power. With this power, they were then able to colonize other lands, such as Africa, which allowed them to gain even more power. When they arrived at these foreign lands, they used the natives, the less wealthy, as slaves. They later extracted resources and destroyed environments for their own benefits. Though this sounds unjust and mean, the effects of this colonization allowed us to have this great nation we have today. Though Africa has become independent, it is still controlled by Western countries through world banks. Throughout history, there has always been an unequal balance in the world, and it's because of this unequal balance that we have come to have this powerful nation we do today. If one sought to disrupt this balance, it would lead to chaos and lack of growth for everyone.
In a socialist environment, redistribution of wealth would be an essential to holding up that economy, but this has failed people before. A prime example of failed socialism is within Native American reservations. Natives live with no water, no electricity, miles and miles away from civilizations, and rely on government funds only. Reliance on government funds ultimately fails these people. They entrust our high powers with supporting them and their indigenous lands. In addition to this, our government pushes them into small corners of land, giving them no street address, which ultimately means they cannot vote in any elections. Their rights are being stripped away, even though this is supposed to prove equality. This is failed socialism, an ideal, perfect government where everybody gets what they're so-called entitled to, not what they actually deserve and work for. The socialist agenda would and is slowly turning government aid programs into private ones. For example, turning Social Security into private retirement accounts, which do not benefit those who could not be able to work once they were older. Therefore, this change benefits nobody at all. It could result in Medicaid turning into private insurance policies, leaving little to no access to health care for those who can't afford private insurance in the first place.